Hello guys and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Bernadette and my channel is about fashion design, sewing, thrifting and some lifestyle. So if that sounds interesting to you, then keep on watching because today I'm going to share with you my favorite tips I wish I had known sooner when I started with fashion design. I have my lovely notebook here, which I got when I was probably around 10 years old. And I made 7 points. So let's start with the first one. Tip number 1, measure yourself. When I started sewing, what I did in the very beginning, I took all my measurements. I took basically the bust, the waist, the hip, the arms and the neck. I think that's all what I did. I realized that even though I made this sketch like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, something like this, I still use it to this day.
Can you believe that?
So I really do recommend to do it. And of course, sometimes you will be working with patterns, but it's going to be very helpful, especially if you're doing form-fitted clothes. It's going to be very important that you know exactly your measurements. For the next one, we are going to go to my small tiny atelier and I'm going to show you everything there. So now we are here where I create all my stuff. My second tip is choose wisely when it comes to fabric. The type of fabric you're working with is definitely going to decide how hard or how easy a project is going to be. For my very first project, I was very naive and the fabric I chose was linen. And don't get me wrong, the fabric is lovely, but little did I know that working with non-starch fabric is probably 150 times more difficult than working with a high-stretch fabric. Of course, it's quite logical and even obvious, but for me it was not obvious, and I started sewing with linen, and I realized in the meantime that you have to be very precise. You have to cut very exact patterns, you have to make very exact patterns. Moreover, usually you have to include zippers. I remember with my very first project, I wanted to make a skirt, like a nice linen skirt, and for some reason I thought that I'm just going to cut out the panels, etc. and put it on my body, but then I realized that, wait a minute, if it doesn't have any stretch, I cannot just put it on my body. Even though the fabric, like the panels, match my body. It means I have to have some, guess what, zipper. And zippers are not necessarily easy, especially, let me show you something. Here I have my pack of invisible zippers. Usually, I would say, especially for dresses and skirts, etc., or to be honest, mainly for everything, I feel like, you would use invisible zippers, and these things are not kind, okay? Like, you definitely need some practice and you definitely need to understand, watch some tutorials in order to be able to work with them. And I think now you have already enough reasons to not start with a non-stretch fabric. And of course, what do I recommend on starting with? Which fabric? These nice stretchy ones. When you're buying fabrics, it's usually also included in the description that it has a 4-way stretch. It means basically not only like this, but in every direction you can pull it. And obviously, because of the stretch, it means automatically you have more room to work with, or if you make small mistakes, it's not going to be that obvious, or at least you will be able to put it on your body, right? You still have to be, of course, precise and a bit more generous with the fabric, in the beginning especially, but it's going to make your sewing life 100 times easier. And now we come to tip number 3, and it's try to make form-fitting pieces. I find that it's much more easier to make than, for example, a t-shirt, let's say. Because for the t-shirt, the sewing part is a bit more tricky if you're sewing together the sleeves, etc. But with dresses or a skirt, whatever, tops, You can use only straight stitches and almost like actually straight, not only the stitch itself, but the seam is also going to be more or less straight. And not to mention, I think the outcome will be a bit more rewarding. Personally, I really loved the outcome in the beginning of my form-fitting tube dresses, whatever, because they looked, I'm not saying professional, but they really did look like I bought them from the store, and it was simply a nice feeling, and it kept me motivated for my future projects. And just like that, we are coming to tip number 4, which is don't be afraid to experiment with patterns. With time, I kept on realizing more and more that a lot of people work with certain patterns. I'm not saying that you should not use patterns from the internet, whatever. I just simply want to encourage you to make your own patterns with your own measurements. Of course, if you're sewing for someone else, ignore this. A lot of the times I have to say that I work completely without patterns, because I find it very exciting when you don't have a clear plan, and it's a bit like improvising with fabrics and sewing. I know that in the process I'm going to change things on the puppet, and I end up with like a complete different design, but this is what I love about it. And I think it's super nice to experience, because you learn so much every single time. Of course, if I'm making some simple design, I reach to my patterns which I made in the beginning. For example, as you can see, this is for a stretch skirt front piece. So if my design includes a skirt part, or if I'm making only a skirt, then this is great. I just pull this out, put on the fabric, tick, cut, and you're done. Using your clothes from your own closet is, I think, the easiest way to make clothes. For instance, I have this t-shirt here, which I really love. And what I will do if I want to recreate the exact same shape, I simply take my t-shirt, I put it on the fabric, make sure it's laid out perfectly. If you want and if you trust your skills, you can just go in straight with a scissor and cut the pattern, or you use a fabric marker and then you cut it out. Tip number 5, seam allowance. I think it happens to a lot of us. I had definitely, and I still do have cases where I'm a bit impatient or naive and I don't use enough fabric. But please always be generous, especially in the beginning. Be generous with fabric, because you can always make things tighter. If it doesn't fit right, if it's too loose, you can just add the stitch and fix it. But if you don't have enough fabric at the end, adding more fabric is way more difficult than taking the fabric in. So always be generous with fabric and use seam allowance. Tip number 6 is using the right equipment, let's say so. Unfortunately, in the beginning I did break like 2 needles because I simply did not realize that I was not using the right needle for the fabric. There's a reason why there are needles, especially for jeans, for example, or for other heavy fabrics. Tip number 7 is not really a tip, it's more like a recommendation really, is using a puppet. I would probably need an update on my puppet as well, because it's a bit shaky and not so stable, as you can see. For the first like year or 1.5 years, I did not use a puppet actually. I was doing everything on my own body. I started with one panel, I put it on my body, I measured it, then again took it off, measure, cut, body, etc. It was quite a process, so I wish I had used a puppet earlier. So if you can, I really recommend to get yourself a puppet. So these were my favorite tips which can make your sewing life and designing life potentially much easier. I really hope you enjoyed the video and that it was helpful for you. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to ask and comment down below. I would love to have your opinion and what you want to see from me next. So without further ado, I'm wishing you a wonderful week, a wonderful day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!